Well, hello out there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's Dr. Janice Hooker Fortman and Relationship Matters. I am so happy to see everyone today. I have been on a hiatus. I've been on vacation and full transparency, for part of my vacation, I was in Facebook jail. How did that happen? Something that someone put on my page in 2017. I don't even remember it being on my page. And whatever it was, I didn't delete it. But I'm happy to be back. I am refreshed and I am renewed. And I am so happy again to be back with you. As you know, this show is all about relationships because there are all kinds of relationship matters and relationships do matter. We're going to talk about a relationship that a lot of us are involved in or going to be involved in or want to be involved in or have been involved in, and that's marriages. Marriages. Did you know that 50%, and I think it's a little over, 50% of marriages end in divorce? I have an expert today that's going to talk about how to keep a happy marriage. He has solved the marriage problem. And his name is Tim Kellis. He is an author, a public speaker, and a relationship coach. So I'm going to talk about him, and we're going to talk about his journey from being a renowned Wall Street analyst to a public speaker. So let us bring on Tim. Hi,
Doc,
Tim.
Dr. Janice. Hey, what a beautiful introduction. I love that video clip of all the relationship stuff. It really poignantly highlights the significance of relationships in our lives. That was really cool.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank you for coming on my show to talk about something that's very, very, very important. So let me say this. You are I would say, a relationship coach and a public speaker. And you had a journey, the journey that led you to tackling this significant personal issue. So after a successful career that eventually landed you on Wall Street, you met who you thought was the girl of your dreams, only to see that that particular relationship ended in bitterness and anger. So now you went to a marital therapist. He wasn't doing anything for you all. And so you decided to tackle this issue yourself. And I hope, and I know my audience hopes, to get some tips and teach us how to create a lifelong marriage. So I want you to start off your journey and when I say your journey, I mean your career all the way up to where you are now.
And it is important to note, Dr. Janice, that I do not have a psychology background. But just a real quick, just to kind of repeat what you just said, my dad was a cab driver, by the way. So I was raised poor. Put myself through engineering school, went back to grad school, landed on Wall Street, where I was the first semiconductor analyst on Wall Street to focus on the communications market. The only reason why I say that is solving the marriage problem was not my first original thoughts, my second. And I didn't tell you this, the other part of my story, Dr. Janice, when I was 12 years old, I told my mom I wanted to be a Catholic priest when I was 12 years old. And then I discovered girls. So that whole career path kind of got derailed. But so was raised with a moral compass, made it very successfully on Wall Street. And then, as you said in the introduction, this girl, and it was actually a girl that I had actually known for about 8 years. She always had a boyfriend. I always had a girlfriend, but we got together after knowing each other for 8 years without a relationship. And we just got together, and anybody who's really fallen in love knows it happens very quickly when it clicks. You know, we got together very quickly. We a whole circle of friends. We already had the mutual friends, and we just integrated our life together very quickly. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together, but then we started fighting. And as you said, when we went to the therapist, and I realized the therapist wasn't helping, that's really the pain. And I just want to stress this: the pain. We all have gone through that. Anybody it's been in a serious relationship that ended. To me, it was just excruciatingly painful. And my outlet, my Wall Street background, my analytical background, was for me to research and write this book. And so just real quickly, it's about the reason why relationships are successful is because couples get along. The reason why relationships are unsuccessful is because couples don't get along. It's conflict resolution. And that's really the focus of the whole message. Once you figure that out, your marriage is on the right track.
Okay. So conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Now, I did some research on you, of course, and you talk about the psychological factors in a relationship, and not understanding each other is a cause, one of the major causes of problems in a relationship or a marital relationship. So tell us about that.
Well, the first thing, Martin Luther King was once asked what he thought was the problem with marriage. And his humble response was, "Oh, I don't know. I think they don't know each other very well and are afraid." That's how Martin Luther King summarized what was wrong with marriages. And when you talk about the psychological component, and that really you're jumping to the heart of the dialogue, which you should, because one of the things that I realized, Dr. Janice, is I am the first person to introduce a psychological component to my marriage message. There's no marriage message out there today that includes a psychological component. It's all behavioral advice. That's what you get. The 5 love languages is behavioral advice. This is what you get from professional psychologists. I don't want to get into a long conversation about that, but I just want you to understand that when we discuss the psychological component to a marriage, that is new. The only reason why I can comfortably and confidently tell anybody that I have solved the marriage problem is because I forgave my parents when I was 25 years old. It turns out
wait. Exactly. You said you forgave your parents?
I forgave my parents when I was 25 years old.
You forgave them for what?
For being parents, as it turns out. The biggest influence, this is what I'm talking about, Dr. Janice, the biggest influence on a marriage is the relationship with the parents, because that's where we first learn about love. The notion of mental development implicitly states that the earlier in the development process, the less developed you are. When are you least developed? At birth. Who are your biggest influence? Your parents. Your earliest influence is your parents, and that's where you also learn about love, particularly now that we're in our second and third generation of divorce. where most marriages either end up in divorce or end up as struggle for controls in unhappy marriages. Because at the end of the day, what I'm doing is I'm neutralizing the power drive. Is I'm teaching couples how to create marriages based on equality, where nobody's in charge, and where there are no distinctions, there can be no superiority. Perfect equality affords no temptation for abuse or control. When couples understand and the light bulb clicks on what equality means to them in their relationship, that's when the journey is started. That's when they see the road ahead of them and what that road ahead of them is supposed to look like. And that significantly reduces the anxiety that couples have when they understand what I'm teaching them. Very, very profound.
And very, very different. And
see what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. There's nobody else that approaches this conversation in this direction. I'm the first one. I'm the first to market with a solution that's mentally based and psychologically based. That has not happened before. This is what I'm bringing. Again, I'm analyzing. This is an analytical conversation from a business analytical perspective. What I'm bringing to the market is a mental-based solution that addresses marriages not only mentally, but psychologically, and that has not happened before.
And okay, so how can you differ and this is me asking this question from what you've just said.
Sure.
Psychology, when you talk about psychology affects behavior. and so you're saying psychology first and then behavior, instead of focusing on behavior. Stop focusing on behavior and focus on the psychology. Now, and you talk about equality in a marriage. Okay, so equality to me means like 50-50. How can you have 50-50 in a marriage? So I'm going to what I understand and what I've been taught or what I see. Someone has to be the one who, let's say, makes the decisions, or okay, when you have 50-50, this is me. When you have 50-50, who's going to decide which way to go when it's time to make decisions if everything is 50-50?
Okay, so let me answer.
51-50. I mean 51-49. So what do you mean by 50?
So let me answer two questions. Let me answer the behavior versus psychology question, and then I'll answer what you just said about 50-50. So what I mean when I discuss the psychology industry, so the most popular message out today is the 5 love languages. That is the one that has garnered the most attention in the public. If Gary Chapman wanted to write that book psychologically, what he would have done is he would have said that both in the relationship should be doing all 5. The one that you want because either you didn't have it in your childhood, or your partner isn't giving it to you because your partner didn't have it in his or her childhood. If he would have written the book from that direction, he would have introduced a psychological component to the 5 love languages. But the psychology industry is not taught about marriages psychologically. They're taught about marriages behaviorally. And one of the biggest light bulbs that goes on when I work with people is when they realize that I am not giving behavioral advice. I am giving mental advice. And your question about 50-50 is the perfect example. And so here's my nerd part in my book. Sorry about this, Dr. Janice, but what I do in the book is I use the example of the two co-founders of Microsoft, Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Are you familiar with those two? Okay. So the point is Paul Allen, beard, he was an engineer, he was a nerd. In fact, not that money should buy you happiness, but Paul Allen died recently, worth tens of billions of dollars, and never got married. In fact, I believe he lived with his mom for the longest time. He had girlfriends, so he was not gay. But he never got married. That's how big of a nerd he was. So when Bill Gates and Paul Allen gets together and they form that partnership, Bill Gates is the sales guy. Paul Allen is the engineer. How is this sales guy going to sell something unless he knows what the engineer is developing? How is the engineer going to develop something unless he knows what the customer wants? But more importantly, Bill Gates has his skill set. Paul Allen has his skill set. A husband has his skill set. A wife has her skill set. That's a partnership. This is the confusion is people think that a partnership means that you're the same person. It is absolutely the opposite of that. That's one of the things that people get in trouble when they think that their partner should be thinking just like them. That is one of the big causes of problems in relationships. But the reality is when you understand it from a partnership perspective, you value the differences. You realize that your partner may know something that you don't know. And so to answer your question, a partnership, you and I become business partners, Dr. Janice. I'm the accountant and you want to buy a $5,000 computer and we can't afford it. How are we going to address that? We're going to address that where you understand it from my perspective and I understand it from your perspective. We find a solution that we are both satisfied with. That is what a partnership is. That is how a marriage partner is supposed to work to be successful, where they both have an equal say, but there's also the recognition that I'm the good accountant, you're the good salesperson, whatever those skill sets are. But when you're building a partnership, these are some of the things that you're discussing when you're building that partnership with each other. So that is how when you understand a partnership from that perspective, then it makes sense. This is conflict resolution. How are you and I going to figure out how to buy this $5,000 computer that we can't afford? It's logical. We understand each other's perspective, and the goal is to solve the problem. What I do, and if you want, I can elaborate, but I address arguments. That's what we need to understand in order to realize how arguments are actually motivations for us to learn more about ourselves so that we can learn to grow together. But that's when you really get into the psychological stuff about marriages.
So you really have to know yourself. I mean, both partners have to really know themselves. Right. And so what you're saying is what will happen in a marriage is if, let's say, okay, I'm married and let's say I don't really know me and my husband doesn't really know himself, or he knows himself, but I don't know me. And okay, I have this question. Sometimes people will say, oh, let's say a husband and a wife, I know you better than you know yourself. Can that be true?
Well, what that means to me when you say that, okay, and you and I spoke earlier about Carl Jung, okay, and so people that are listening or watching this who don't know who Carl Jung is, Carl Jung was 19 years younger than Freud. Freud looked up to Jung so much that he considered him not only his heir apparent, but his son. And let's just say Jung disagreed with Freud's sexuality theory, so they had their famous breakup in 1912, and Jung went much further than Freud did to discover how the mind works. One of my ultimate goals is to ultimately replace Freud with Jung. It's amazing to me that the psychology industry is still following Freud, so I'm here to basically help that transition so that we're following Jung instead of Freud. But Jung is the one who referred to them as shadows. Okay, and what a shadow is, it's a blockage. It's a psychological blockage or a barrier that does not allow you to see something objectively. So, for example, before I forgave my parents, I was angry with them. I had this girl that I went out with before this conversation that ultimately led to me forgiving my parents. She had the perfect family life, loved her parents, loved her siblings. They spoke every day on the phone. And she used to always get mad at me. Why are you so angry at your parents? Because I had the whole lineup, the whole laundry list of all of the things that my parents did that destroyed my childhood. I could not look at my parents objectively. I was looking at it through the lens of the hurts and the fears that were generated from those hurts from my childhood as an adult, not understanding it as an adult. That's why it's called a prejudice. That I was not able to look at my parents objectively until I forgave them. The whole point about growing together as a couple is to be able to bring out these things about your past that you might not be so comfortable about, knowing that your partner will not judge you, so that you guys can bring up the source of the fear and learn to heal together, where your partner is a shoulder for you to cry on when you go through the forgiveness process, which is a mental process that is a release of the anxieties that were originally caused by that experience or relationship, most significantly with your parents.
So then what happens when there's only one parent? In other words, maybe the person, one of the couple, one of the partners, or the husband or the wife, was only raised by their mom or only raised by their father. And you say that you have to look at the love, but if it's not two people, how can a person who is in a marriage and have issues, so to speak? I don't know if I'm thinking.
I know exactly what you're saying, Dr. Janice.
Okay,
Dr.
okay,
Janice,
okay.
there are always two parents psychologically. When one of them leaves, they don't leave the child psychologically. In fact, that is one of the big problems of children of one parent, is the way that they mentally develop in childhood with their perspective of what happened between them and their parent that left. They often blame themselves for the parent leaving. That's a big, huge cause of mental problems. It's just like if you were given up for adoption. You grow up your entire childhood realizing that both of your parents gave you up. And you have to deal with that psychologically. Very, 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 very difficult to do. And when you lose one of your parents, particularly when it's they leave and they don't come back, because children look at it from their perspective. Children can only see their perspective. Listen to this, Dr. James. This was a very enlightening experience for me, to answer your question. I went to my 20-year high school reunion. My parents were very strict. In fact, my dad, no longer around, he knows I respect him. If you were to call my mom up right now and ask my mom about her parenting skills, she will tell you, because she says this every time I see her, I was too strict on you kids. My mom will tell you that. So I'm at my 20-year high school reunion and I'm talking to one of my classmates and I made some comment about my parents, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, that's right, you had the strict parents." I never once in my entire life ever thought about somebody else's perspective of my childhood. Never occurred to me until this guy brought it up, and he woke me up to the fact that I never understood that other people were observing me and seeing my life. This is how we are so self-centered, because we're developing our identity as children, that we only see things from our perspective. A child will never say, "My parent left me because my parent does not like my other parent." the child will say, my parent left me because of me. Even though, the parents are fighting, they'll still blame themselves when one of those parents leaves. So a child does not have two parents. They may not have one physically, but those two parents are psychologically there in their mental development. And it's so important to understand the part that plays in the individual's mental development in order to understand their perspective on what they have on themselves. A balanced ego is not when you're better than anybody else. It's when you're better than you used to be. That is the billion-dollar question that we all as individuals in this new age of individuality are trying to figure out on how we can live with ourselves. And that's the answer to that question.
I never thought of it that way.
Nobody has, because nobody's teaching this. This is my point.
Wow. Well, I have some questions that have come in. But first I'm going to go to a commercial and to a couple of commercials. And I have a couple of questions that came in, and then of course I have some more questions. So
please, sure, that would be great.
So you put a lot on my mind.
I always do. I apologize, Dr. Janice, but that is my goal is to get you thinking. It's all good. It's all good. I understand.
It is all good. It is all good. Okay. So we will be right back with Tim Kellis. Do not go away.
From right to left, and every angle in between. Know what I mean? In this day and age, so many seem like they're lost inside a world and held captive in a dream. A glimpse of mediocrity, take one for the team. And even though this path is long and this place is unforeseen, gotta keep your feet moving, filling spaces in between, seeing places in your dreams. If you complacent by your means, by all means go back to sleep. The path is steep, there's no rest for the weary if you intend to reach peaks. It gets deep, come on, it's infinite, we still climbing, yes, y'all. And thanks for the positive vibes, but I still got a mountain to climb. Just take it one step at a time,
I'm gonna ball till I fall, gonna ride till I die. I'll never give in, yo, if I wanna survive. Not gonna swallow my pride, I'll never give up, cause when it's all said and done, is what I've done enough. I push myself to the edge, I push myself to the brink. Is the toil all worth that it makes me stop and think. But through the mud and the mire, the joy and the strife, no one can claim that I didn't live all of this beautiful life.
Well, we are back. We are.
Yes, welcome. Hey, great to be back. Are we here?
Yes. Now, this question came in. It says, in many relationships, many games are played. How do you get off of that merry-go-round?
That is a great question, and it's important to understand why people play games. The goal, again, it's all conflict resolution. The goal is to be able to be open with your partner. The goal is to be able to bring up anything with your partner in a non-judgmental way, knowing your partner is not going to think less of you when you bring up something. Here's the first point about this, Dr. Janice. Okay, I've got some news for you. You are not perfect. I am not perfect. Nobody listening or watching this call is perfect. The only perfect entity that is upstairs. So the point is, it's important to understand that people are going to make mistakes in relationships. That is a fact, and it's really not the issues, but how you deal with the issues. The reason why people play games is because they are afraid of bringing up the issue directly, because the issue does not get resolved. Arguments are control mechanisms. This is when you go to from a disagreement to an argument, when you get into this control factor, which is what an argument is. An argument is a control mechanism. That's when the relationship starts breaking down, because people become afraid of bringing things up for fear, because what an argument is, it's a judgment, that you're being judgmental when you argue with somebody. When you understand the psychology of an argument, that's when you're breaking it down so that you can keep that from happening. But the backdrop to the question on playing games is, how did the relationship get to the point where games have to be played in order for points to be communicated between two people, which is what a game is. A game is a way of manipulating what you're trying to get across to somebody, because the way, when you do it directly, it doesn't work. So you have to figure out some way of psychologically manipulating the other person to see your side. And the reason why that occurs is because of the judgmental environment in the relationship that doesn't allow direct, open communication. So if you want to keep that from happening, you have to learn how to create a judgment-free relationship. If there's judgment, if there's to argue with a person who has abandoned the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. Once you go from a logical disagreement in a conflict to an emotional argument, Dr. Janice, you are a jerk. What is that going to do how does that solve? In fact, it gets it emotional. Now you're angry at me. I called you a jerk. You're going to fight or flight. This is the way that and look at how she's, yes, if I were to actually, I'm not calling Dr. Janice a jerk, please. That is not. But the point is if that is the way that once our disagreement, turn into an argument, there's a point of no return. You cannot solve an argument. You have to bring that conversation back down to its logical discussion in order to figure out each person's perspective, in order to find something that is the benefit for both, which is what you do in a partnership. So it's important to understand why somebody is motivated to have to play a game in order to keep that from happening.
Okay, yeah, because this comment came in from Robert Brooker. And he says, once we got off the highway, that was when she said to me with a sense of amazement that she heard every word I said. It seemed that normally she didn't. She was just an expert at reading faces and saying whatever someone wants to hear. So in other words, and he said, no one believed me. The in-laws had been laying down some stories. This was my introduction to a codependent relationship. But it seems as though that person he was involved with was playing games with him.
Well, the goal is not to find love. The goal is to find the barriers that we have built within ourselves psychologically that's keeping us from opening up to love. And when people are playing games, so just put that, if you could put that back up, the very first part of it, he said she had said something that she had never heard him before speak. With a sense of amazement, she heard every word I had said. It seemed normally she didn't. She was just, when he's saying she was just an expert at reading faces and saying whatever someone wanted to hear, when we become codependent, again, a balanced ego is not when we're better than anybody else, is when we're better than we used to be. But somebody who's not gone through that mental development still requires the approval of other people for their sense of who they are. This is one of the reasons why our celebrities are so messed up in general psychologically, because they get all of their data points from what other people tell them. And what that does not allow you to do is it does not allow you to open yourself up to somebody else. What she's saying in that saying there is that she was saying what people wanted her to say because she was relying on their opinion of her. And what she's doing is she's realizing if she could say her truth, if she could speak from her soul, then she gets to reveal herself. And it's a great, amazing thing when you really understand the concept of vulnerability and exposing yourself to your partner psychologically. When it's a fearful thing to first do, but once you get over that hurdle of doing it the first time, then you get a lot more comfortable in being able to reveal these things about yourself to your partner, which is the goal in order for two people to learn how to grow together.
Right. And I this first sentence, it was revealed at the end that I never knew who it was I married. You know? Wow. And like you talk about revealing yourself, and that used to be a very hard thing for me to do. Well, someone told me once that it was like I had a zipper, and that, you know, and I would not unzip, you know, because you're talking about vulnerability. Right. So now here this person says, what makes people, I guess he means what makes
abusive.
Abusive, is it learned behavior?
So let me answer that question this way. In fact, that's such a great question. Dr. Janice, the event you and I met in Chicago, there was a girl there, and if you know what I'm talking about, I don't know if I should mention her name, but she's a product of an abusive marriage, and she's taken the whole message of, you know, how to help, you know, women or people. You know, women could be abusing men too. Men abuse women, women abuse men. But let me explain it to you this way. I break an argument down into its component parts. This is the real psychological breakthrough. So what I do is I discuss the process that we go through mentally that leads to arguments and anger, that leads to that emotion. It starts off with an insecurity, which is a fear and anxiety, mainly from your relationship with your parents. Say your parents got divorced. You learned as a child that marriages are supposed to end because that's what your parents taught you. And now you have a fear. This is one way people take that experience. Not everybody takes it differently, but one way people take that is they take it that they are afraid of divorce happening in their marriage. That fear, that insecurity is what leads to the prejudice. Okay, our mental problems, it turns out, are prejudices. Again, mom and dad getting divorced, I now have a preconceived opinion, which we know is what a prejudice is, that's emotionally based, that's not logically thought out about marriage based on the lesson that my parents gave me. That prejudice is then was what leads to being judgmental, which then is what leads to anger. And so the point is I'm connecting the dots between fear and anger. This is what I'm doing. So when you say somebody is abusive, the reason why they get to that state of mind, it's unfortunately it's what happens when arguments are not controlled, where somebody doesn't step off of the argument plank and both of them are taking it to a bigger and bigger plateau until eventually one of them just flips out and does that. But what you got to do is you got to keep the conversation. So here's the way I explain that. You come home late from work and your partner gets mad at you. Let's think this through, okay? The caveat, Dr. Janice, is that you were not out drinking with your friends, that you did get that call at 5 p.m., that you were there for an hour, you forgot to call your spouse on the way home. You were not doing something immoral. You were not doing something you weren't supposed to, because you are not mentally clear to deal with the conflict. But when you get home, you had a phone call, but you didn't call, you got in trouble. This was the question that I asked myself for years. You're not really doing something wrong when you are late from work. It's not like you're really doing something bad or anything, but you still get in trouble. How do you deal with that situation? And so the point is what we normally do. So you come home late from work, your partner gets mad at you. That's the fight or flight, right? The instinct, right? You're either going to flee. You're going to say, screw it, I don't want to bring it out. I don't want to, have the bad environment, or you're going to fight back. If you realize what you'll learn, Dr. Janice, it has nothing to do with you coming home late from work. It has to do with low self-esteem, abandonment issues. Mom and dad got divorced. It's got to do something with their insecurity is the source of the fear. Something in their past is the source of the fear. So what you do is you turn the conversation around to the person that got angry. What are you afraid of? That is the question that took me years to figure out. But that question, everybody that I've taught that to, because here's what happens. You come home late from work, your partner's in an emotional state. When you ask, what are you afraid of? They pulled back to the logical state. What do you mean? That you get them back thinking again, because now you've got the conversation in the direction that it should be, which is why were they angry? And if you could stop anger from elevating to the point of becoming abusive. Remember, equality, there's no temptation for abuse or control. If it's based on equality, it never gets to that level where one of them finally gets to their boiling point and they go off and in and they become abusive. That's why people get abusive, is because of those conflicts that are not resolvable, nor are they resolved, yet they still fight about them. These are those conflicts that never get resolved, that eventually explode. This is why you have to solve every conflict in your marriage, because there's still the psychological residue from the source of the anxiety to begin with. So that's how you address that, to keep abuse from entering into a relationship.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this question. How can you understand your partner's perspectives? In other words, let's say you understand your own, but you don't understand your partner's. How can you understand your partner's, where they're coming from, if you've never been in their shoes, or you can't relate?
In fact, the beginning of my response to that, did you read To Kill a Mockingbird when you were young?
I don't remember. I know I did. I know I had to.
There's
school, but I don't remember it.
There's one line in that book that changed my life. And the line in that book is, if you want to understand a man, you have to walk in his shoes. And I remember reading that as a kid going, that sounds profound. I use that every day of my life. This is the foundation of happiness, is being able to see it through the eyes of the other person. The way I describe it, though, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When people see that line, they most often focus on what? The pursuit of happiness part, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down life and liberty. Life is morality. All life is precious, taught to us by the church. In relationships, morality is empathy or understanding your partner's feelings. Liberty is a political concept. In our society, in America, we know it's to teach us democracy. Democracy is equality. In relationships, equality is conveyed as respect or understanding your partner's thoughts. Empathy is understanding your partner's feelings. Respect is understanding your partner's thoughts. But let me answer the question this way, Dr. Janice. So, do you get angry at slow drivers? You ever do that?
I used to. I don't anymore, but I used to.
So I did too, until I solved the problem. And how I solved the problem was I had an epiphany one day when I realized that the other driver is driving someplace too. When I was able to look at it from, and I do this every time now, when I pull up behind somebody going slower to me, I think to myself, they are going someplace too. And once I realize it from their perspective, the anxiety of slow drivers has been completely eliminated inside of me psychologically. But the point is think about that analogy as it pertains to a marriage. Think about what happens in a marriage when you're able to see a conflict through the eyes of your partner. It will completely open up with so much clarity on what the real issue is going on between the two of you when you understand the background of your partner that led to their belief system. You had asked earlier about behavior, or somebody asked a question about behavior. One of the discoveries that I have made, which is another first, is what causes behavior. The psychology industry for 100 years has studied animals because of the biology theory to try and figure out why humans behave. The answer to the question on why we behave is our character traits. Our character traits are our belief system. Our belief systems are unconscious. And let me explain what I mean by that. I am a nice guy. That is true. But I do not walk around thinking to myself, Tim's a nice guy, Tim's a nice guy, but I behave accordingly. Dr. Janice, you're a nice woman, but you don't walk around saying, Dr. Janice is a nice person, but you will be nice to somebody, you'll open door. Our behaviors are based on our belief system. But the point is we have to understand the source of those negative belief systems. That's when the psychological work starts helping it. Because we're not talking about being a nice person. That doesn't cause anybody any problems. We're obviously talking about those belief systems that are the cause of conflicts in a marriage, and how do you address those belief systems so that you can open your eyes up to look at a bigger reality by looking at that belief system from a much larger, more all-encompassing perspective.
Wow. No,
and there's a lot here. This is a lot to unwind, but I've been working on this for 20 years. I have built up a knowledge base for people to understand how they create a lifelong marriage. My mission is to lower the divorce rate. That is the journey that I'm on, and I'm not stopping until I get there. It's about time, Dr. Janice, that somebody puts their foot down and comes out with a knowledge base that people, once they learn it, will know how to keep their marriage on the path for the rest of their lives. That is something that is unbelievable that we've not done yet in our society, and that is my mission to do that.
And that's a wonderful, wonderful mission. So let me ask you this question. Are you happily married?
I have the most amazing woman in my life. I will tell you though, she's asked me not to talk about her. So one of the things you'll notice is I don't talk about my personal situation, but this is not about me getting here and talking about me being happily married. This is not about the happy married. The lessons that I learned was from a relationship that did not work out. So, but
Right.
I mean, so, yeah, I mean, the you don't learn people that are in successful relationships. There's no conflict that causes them to have to learn something. The lessons that I learned because of a relationship of mine that did not work out. So that was the whole motivation for me doing that.
So now, I love your mission. Now, how do you carry it out? Do you do coaching or public speaking? How do you carry out your mission?
Well, I mean, I have a free 2-hour seminar. That's how I start with people. You know, there's my email address that she's putting up now. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I will tell you, and you and I spoke about this earlier and how you and I met. I belong to an organization called the Mentor Studio. It was founded by a guy by the name of Michael Silvers, who created T. Harv Ekert's Peak Performance Coaching Program. His partner is Mary Glorfield, who was Tony Robbins' VP for 18 years. They are mentoring me to get on stages. In fact, they're just starting to roll out stages in September. I spoke to Mary today, and they've partnered with Get Motivated, that was founded by a guy named Brian Forte, and he's the largest personal development event promoter in the country. And I'm about to get involved in what he is doing with Mary, and I'm about to start showing up on stages across the country. That's the only way that I'm going to be able to do this, is to get in front of groups of people. So there's really going to be a chance for people to be able to see me live coming up very shortly. The first event that she was talking about is in early September. I don't give the details until it's been firmed and finalized, but I'm literally going to probably get an opportunity to start speaking on big stages. You know, I have to earn it. I'm not there yet. This is not proclaiming where I'm at. You know, Mary has to think that I'm there, prepared enough to go on stage, but that is where I'm heading with Mary and Michael, to be able to be one of their speakers as they integrate what they're doing with not only Brian Forte, but they're also partnering with a guy by the name of Bill Walsh, which is how you and I met.
Right.
Yeah. So,
right.
You know, Michael Silvers and Bill Walsh have known each other for a long time. And Bill Walsh always does that. His are more business focused. Brian Forte is more personal development focused. So yeah. I can see what I'm doing. You know, it will be a little bit easier with what he's doing with Get Motivated. But yeah, so that's basically where I'm going. Oh, let me mention one thing. Dr. Jens, one more thing. It's on Facebook. The name of the group is the Marriage Support Group. And when you search that on Facebook, you'll see a picture of a couple kissing. I'm just about to get to 12,000 members in this group. I've been adding about 3,000 members a month into this group in the last 2 or 3 months. I've gotten to a tipping point. And one of the reasons is I allow other marriage experts to participate in the dialogue in this group, which is not something any of the other marriage groups allow anybody to do. They think you're soliciting, but I allow other marriage experts to take the conversation into a more productive direction versus, you know, other marriage groups, which is just basically, you know, complaint sessions about how, you know, their spouses are not doing what they want them to be doing. But my dialogue in that group takes it a lot further on teaching couples how to create a lifelong marriage.
And this is on Facebook?
It's called the Marriage Support Group. And at the time of this broadcast, I'm just about to go over 12,000 members. But I've been adding like 3,000 members a month for the last 2 or 3 months.
That is wonderful.
It's a great community.
Wow. I think I'm going to join that group. I'm trying to show it on here.
You should, and you can contribute as well, Dr. Janice. You'll have some great things to add to the dialogue as well. Not only that, we could do one of these broadcasts to my Facebook group if you ever want to think about doing that. I've got access to 12,000 members to that group. We can do something like this there too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. The time just flies.
Always does.
The time flies. But I want to keep that up for my viewers so that they can see that they can join that face.
Yeah, and again, the name of the group is the Marriage Support Group. So that's the name of the group. Yeah,
Okay.
so just go and search that.
All righty. So Tim, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been eye-opening for me, and I know for my audience. I really thank you for coming on and solving this marriage problem. I am all for you and your mission.
Dr. Janice, but seriously, I cannot thank you enough for giving me the opportunity. You know, being introduced to you, you know, the coincidence of us meeting, and then
Right.
you having this TV show. You know, you giving me the opportunity to appear in the show. I'm humbled and honored that you've given me an opportunity to come here and speak about this. So I can't thank you enough for giving me a platform to speak.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And we will keep in contact.
Yes, we will. Thank you very much. I appreciate
All
that.
right. So go onto your Facebook group, and you guess what? You're going to see me in there.
Beautiful. I look forward to running into you there as well.
All right, and bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Dr. Janice.
Well, that was amazing. That was amazing. A lot of really good information and a different perspective on looking at that marriage relationship. I've never heard of it coming from that particular point of view. It's something that I'm going to keep on my mind because I want to maintain my happy marriage. And I know you out there do too. So I want to thank all of you for joining me or joining us on Relationship Matters. There are all kinds of relationships, and relationships do matter. Now, if you would like to advertise on the show with eye-catching videos and increase your visibility, you can contact us at 1-877-667-7325 for details, or you can email me at janfornow125@gmail.com. And if you would like to be a guest on Relationship Matters, just email janfornow125@gmail.com. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and I know that you received some awesome information. Be sure to go on Facebook to you know what, forgive me for let me look, the marriage support group that's on Facebook. In the meantime, in between time, I will see you next week, where my guest will be Bernard Alsbury, the mayor of Hazel Crest, Illinois, who's going to speak to us about plant-based diet and his health and wellness fair that he will be giving in Hazel Crest, Illinois. So I will see you next week. In the meantime, in between time, remember, relationships matter, and there are all kinds of relationships.